The Drink Beer, Think Beer podcast is sponsored by Beer Edge. I'm Andy Crouch, the co-founder of Beer Edge, along with my partner and your podcast host, John Hall. John and I work hard to bring you fresh and insightful content related to the ever-changing world of craft beer. We're passionate about beer and independent journalism. If you're interested in supporting Beer Edge, visit our website, beeredge.com, which is updated regularly with new content, interviews, and articles. Please also consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your episodes. You can also subscribe to the Beer Edge newsletter on our website. Is there anyone you think that we should be talking to? Please drop us a line at andy@beeredge.com with your thoughts. And as always, thanks for your support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall, and this week I'm going to be dialing up the West Coast to talk with Justin Stambaugh of Stave and Nail Brewing in San Diego. But first, a reminder that this show is produced by Beer Edge. Check out beeredge.com for articles, podcasts, and more. And also be sure to follow Beer Edge on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Beer Edge. So when it comes to find out what's happening, what to drink, and who to talk with in San Diego, the best person to ask is Brandon Hernandez. He's a longtime chronicler of San Diego beer and actually just launched a new site that's called sandiegobeer.news. He's prolific and has insight like no other. I remember sitting at the Great Hall at the Great American Beer Festival a few years ago, and as the winners were being announced, there were some bloggers sitting behind me trying to update their social media site as each new brewery in Southern California was announced. As the count grew, as it does, one of them exclaimed, "I don't even know why we bother. Brandon is going to scoop us anyway." Yep, he's that good. So if you're looking to stay in touch with all that's happening in San Diego beer, there's no better place to check out than his site. And recently, I had to postpone a trip to San Diego, but still wanted to cover the area. So I called up Brandon and asked for a suggestion, and he quickly told me to get in touch with Justin Stambaugh. Justin started homebrewing about a decade ago and quickly decided that he wanted to pursue a career in beer. And it wasn't as easy as he had hoped, but eventually he got an internship at Rip Current Brewing in 2012. There, he rose to the ranks, became a brewer, and even helped start that brewery's sour program. And eventually, he decided that it was time to open up his own place, and he didn't even have to look too far. His new brewery, Stave and Nail, is located in the same building as Rip Current. Justin spoke to me from Southern California, and we talk about that move, sour beer, San Diego, and more. Here's our conversation. When did you first get the idea that you wanted to own your own brewery?
Oh man, such a trip back to just how naive I was back then. It was really early. I had always been, just kind of entrepreneurial spirit. So when I initially started home brewing, and this is a mistake I see all the time, is I want to open a brewery and literally not even a batch under their belt. For me, that went a different way. In my first couple of batches, I don't think I was like, I'm definitely going to start a brewery. But in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, we can do something with this. And subsequently all my homebrews were pretty awful, as they should be. You got to brew bad beer at home to realize like, oh, this is hard. But yeah, it was really early. It was really early, and mainly just because I had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit in general. So,
but I mean, there's a difference between. I think there's a lot of folks who homebrew, and they get a couple of batches and like, okay, this could be a profession, but then putting it actually into practice,
right?
That's a whole other skill set, because people can, see something on TV and say, like, oh, okay, I could do that. Or, like, oh, I'm going to win the lotto run one day and here's how I'm going to spend the money. Like, there's lots of, dream scenarios that live in people's heads versus putting the shoes to the pavement to make it happen. What was the path for you? You didn't jump right from being a home brewer to hanging your own shingle.
Yeah, no. And without a doubt, I even if I would have started a brewery from just being a home brewer, it would have definitely not worked. Without a doubt, you need to get a job in the industry to figure that out. And for me, that was a pretty quick transition. So from the time I started homebrewing, gosh, I think I was 20, maybe 21. I'm not, it was 11 years ago. So it was maybe a year and a half before, and trying constantly to get a job in the industry before I finally landed an unpaid internship, which is kind of how you have to do it these days because everybody wants a job in this industry. And that was at Rip Current Brewing Company also in San Marcos, in, I believe, middle of 2012.
Okay. So when it's interesting because I know internships or free labor can be fairly easy to come by, but San Diego and the San Diego region, it is more difficult, right? Because I think people are a little more tuned into brewing as a career there because it is so it is such an industry versus maybe some other states where people are aware of beer, they're aware of breweries, but it's more of a spread out thing.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And this is changing now too. I mean, it's damn near impossible to get an internship now. So this was before when the scene was kind of developing still. And it wasn't easy. I tried multiple places and offered to be an intern. And even then, pretty much the consensus was, I don't want, we don't take on interns because they just end up getting in the way. And
really, there are breweries that were telling you that?
Oh, 100%. Not in the meanest way. Certainly not in like, I didn't leave that conversation like, that was nice of him. No, I didn't leave like that, but it wasn't like, he was just being honest. And now that I've been brewing, for, coming up on a decade, it's true. It's so true. It's so true. You definitely can get in the way as an intern. You do need a basis of knowledge and information. It's not like you just jump in there and start turning butterfly valves and operating tanks or operating filters or anything like that. This stuff takes time and practice, and there should be a skill set in place. And kind of that being said, and this isn't a plug or anything, but I 11 years later from starting homebrewing, and 8 years later from getting my first professional job at watching this scene develop, I now teach a course through a local community college that is geared towards training prospective brewers. So it's a really kind of a difficult course to get into, and we have direct lines to a lot of the major breweries throughout San Diego. And so breweries will come to us after they've gone through our kind of introductory training course where we teach them how to CIP tanks. We teach them kind of just a nice bird's eye view of brewing process. We actually have a pilot brewery. We teach them transfers under pressure, kind of just an introduction into what you would get as a training cellar person. So they can go into that job and actually know what they're doing. So that's kind of the difference between then and now. Now you see the industry looking for qualified individuals, because you're right. The market is just demanding it, and it's just become harder and harder to get jobs without that kind of initial skill set. So
that's in some ways that's really good because
sure.
it probably means that there's going to be a better quality of beer that ultimately reaches the consumer. But we've been talking also a lot about diversity and inclusion as well, and trying to get more people involved in beer. And in some ways that almost seems like now that there's another hurdle that's involved with getting a shot in the brew house.
Oh sure. Yeah. Then that's right. Like you said, good and bad. Good because just like other industries, this is kind of legitimizing the industry
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent, and in my opinion is going to lead to higher wages, higher starting pay for sure. But hopefully that's going to be kind of a trickle up effect, because what you see a lot of times is like, especially with like increasing minimum wage, right? Sure, that bottom end of employee is going to get a higher starting wage, but that doesn't really trickle up to your salaried employees in, the maybe $35,000 to $65,000 range or whatever, whereas you go higher and higher. So hopefully that this is going to be kind of a wage increase effect, but absolutely, this is where, and I don't know where it's going to go on as far as inclusion and getting people who don't have the opportunities to get there by themselves, monetarily. They just don't have the money to do it. They wouldn't, other than just kind of banging the door down at a brewery, they wouldn't have the kind of skill set to even figure out how to get through a community college system to get to this class. I don't know where that's going to go. I will say right now we're on a grant, and that grant is probably going to continue. So the cost of this class in particular, and there's multiple throughout San Diego. I think there's 3 right now: UCSD, SDSU, so San Diego State University, and then Miracosta is the college that I'm at. So there's 3 right now. I believe the other 2 are on some sort of grant as well. But my class is a $4,000 class. And in this first 3 years of the class, that's $400. So
Okay.
Not super bad, but I definitely see your point there for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's just been something that we've been talking about, and I know Garrett Oliver is trying with the Michael Jackson Foundation to dole out
Right.
scholarships and to sort of help with things like that. But there is a growing level of professionalism in the industry right now, and in some ways it could lead to disparity, but I think as long as the educational institutions are thinking about that, and the professors are thinking about that, like you clearly are, there's it's not something that could just be immediately kicked under the rug.
Absolutely. And I will say this, as far as because we for this class it's 15 students. We got a pool of, I believe, just a little over 60 students who are trying to get into it. And there's there's an application process, there's an interview process. The applicants, and I don't know exactly, if there's certain amounts of different, of male versus female or whatnot, but it's been very diverse. All the applicants have been very diverse throughout this is my 3rd cohort. So throughout the cohorts, so I don't know what they're doing, but something is working, which is really cool to see. So
you land at Rip Current and you're there for a good couple years, and it was one of these breweries that I got to visit a few years ago with Brandon Hernandez, and
nice.
Brandon being I think one of the most knowledgeable people in your whole area, if not all of Southern California. Whenever I show up in town, like I just sort of trust him, to take me to interesting places. And we get in his Mustang convertible, and he just sort of like walks into a place, and he's the mayor, as it were. And I was surprised when we went to Rip Current, because like I knew nothing about the brewery, and it's in a strip mall, right? I mean, there's not.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Well, how would you describe it? I guess is probably the better.
It is commercial,
Okay.
but it is kind of strip mallish, especially from the front. You have a lot of, there's like a karate studio, but yeah, it's in a commercial space. But I think what you're getting at is you had never heard of it, and maybe the beer was pretty good.
It was. It really was.
Right.
And because again, Brandon doesn't bring you to a bad pint. And so I guess I want to just talk like a little bit about like what you were making there, because
sure,
whenever I visit San Diego, I'm always impressed by the overall quality that is coming out of breweries there. and that everybody seems to have at least one or two things that define them to help them stand out from the rest. And so
Sure.
as you went from being a home brewer and then became a brewer there and started working on the process, where was your focus and what were you eager to dive into?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that focus narrowed over the 8 years, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that came with learning, figuring out what I liked, et cetera, et cetera. I guess initially, I went from intern, then to head brewer, then from head brewer to head of brewing operations, and kind of, the ownership group was pretty hands off. So for the most part, which was not a good thing to me. And I love these guys. It's not like they're well aware of my feelings on that. But as far as I had a lot of hats. I was wearing a lot of hats, and I got to see a lot of the insides of a business. So I guess I can break this down into two different areas. One can be the beer side, and one can be kind of the business and developing my business model from Rip Current.
Mm-hmm.
But on the beer side, I started and literally thought, well, first of all, just so you can hear how hilarious this is, it was 8 years total that I was there. I started in thinking I was going to open a brewery in about a year. My thought was, and I was young, 20 something. My thought was, hey, I'll save up $10,000. This is the most hilarious number. $10,000, and I'm going to go open a brewery in a year. That was my goal. Oh my God. Not even close, clearly. And beer wise, I liked like what everybody else liked 8 years ago or 10 years ago. I liked stouts, and I liked, brown ales, and I liked IPA specifically. And I wanted to learn how to brew these beers. Fast forward a little while, started kind of realizing, hey, there's other stuff out here besides, just kind of these cookie cutter beers that are running rampant. And I'm starting to notice every brewery in San Diego do the same kind of cookie cutter. Here's our brown, here's our, here's our pale, here's our IPA, and here's our stout.
Right.
And that just kept, so my mind kind of ventured and started to go to barrel aging first, to bourbon barrels. That kind of transformed once I had my first sour beer, so, which I hated, by the way. It was a Cantillon, which it's so funny. It's so, thinking back, it's just so funny how naive and just the inexperience, which is not a bad thing. You should be inexperienced, you should be naive, especially when you have your first lambic. No, I don't think people should like that, because it's an odd flavor. And if you do like it, good on you. But once I had that beer, it intrigued me enough to try more. And once I started to look into this and what sour beer and mixed fermentation was, that's where my interest just got so piqued. And Rip Current was gracious enough to allow me to experiment with this. And a lot of it was just taking, wort off of a batch, and they would let me buy, homebrew vials of different yeast strains. That got into, growing up cultures from bottles. Eventually, I had one tiny little 10 by 10 room with kegs with airlock, the spears pulled out of them and airlocks, and probably 15 to 20 kegs kind of pyramid stacked back there.
So you sort of like willed this, this into existence.
Totally. And they were, and like I said, they were gracious enough to see my ambition for it, and honestly give me the time. Obviously they're paying me.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the time to waste beer, and to, because of that initial when you first start brewing sour beer, this is what so many people do, but I didn't have to because I had so much of it. A lot of people will they have like 2 or 3 carboys of sour beer, and they end up, I get brought homebrew sour beer all the time, and it's really bad
Yeah.
because they're blending this because they only have 3 carboys. I dumped 90+% of that first, all of it basically went down the drain. There were a couple of things that I liked, and that formed into the next run. And then that went into, okay, let's buy 20 barrels, 20 wine barrels. So that's me driving up to Central California and picking up a bunch of wine barrels and coming back. And I remember that first fill, we ended up dumping maybe 15% of the first barrel run, which is not bad. And
that's actually not terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm settled somewhere around that number. I don't even get mad when I dump barrels, not at all. It's a good thing. You got to purge the bad stuff. You can't just be putting out subpar product. But anyway, so that was a part of it. The other part was the business aspect, and that really intrigued me. And a lot of it, honestly, to Rip Current's credit, the beer was fantastic, and I got to learn how to do things the right way. I got to build a program the right way. I got to learn on the business end and ordering and working with suppliers and working with label designers, scheduling, just general management skills, which nobody is a good manager off the bat. Nobody, it just doesn't exist, in my opinion, unless you're a freak. I don't think you're a good manager out of the box. You have to develop those skills, and it should take years and practice and reading and, but to kind of Rip Current's discredit is our marketing and our branding was not as strong as it should have been. It didn't match the beer. So that helped me to formulate, okay, where do I'm starting from scratch. I'm starting to like barrel-aged sour beer. I'm seeing the hazy beers start to come into play, these big imperial pastry stouts, and now even like pilsners and the really light crispy lagers, which all of those beers I love.
And Rauch beer, yeah.
So I kind of took all these as lessons, and that's what helped me develop kind of what we're doing now, and really made me focus. Number one, focus on Instagram. That's a big one, but focus on a niche, and try to figure out, don't be the same. Don't be cookie cutter, especially in San Diego.
So I guess the question is, right, because like you were doing stuff that you enjoyed at Rip Current.
Yeah.
Is it tough though to have the consumers come along if you opened up a certain way, and then even if you have like a side program, is it tough to get consumers to think about you in a different way because of you have like one chance to make a first impression thing?
Oh, I love that question. Yes. Yes, it is. And once your brand is not super strong, specifically in San Diego, from my experience, I'm sure that's universal though. Once your brand is not super strong, it's hard to revive it without like going, all right, let's get we're going to do a full market. You got to have everybody all in, full marketing and branding overhaul. And then also like I think what you're kind of getting at is the side projects. They never took off at Rip Current. We were putting out really cool barrel-aged sours. We had a few releases, probably 3 or 4 before, because it takes so long to get them done. This project was 18 months to 2 years, and we had 3 or 4 batches released. And since I have left, that project has been kind of halted, but I know they're starting to back up again. But it just never took off, and that's difficult. And I didn't want to be in that position for sure.
And so you actually are able to, I imagine, keep tabs on what Rip Current is doing, just because when you opened up your brewery, Stave and Nail, you moved 100 feet to the right?
That's right. Yeah, and that was so it was Rip Current's old space.
Okay.
So that was the original. Initially, it was extra storage. Then we kind of turned it into the barrel cellar, the sour barrel cellar, to keep everything separated. Um, Things came about. They didn't want to have that. It was kind of becoming more of a liability than an asset for them, that just having that extra rent. So, I kind of brought up like, well, hey, I'm definitely interested in taking over this lease.
And
So
you
it was
had
kind of equally.
$10,000, so yeah.
Oh yeah, man, I was balling. I was thinking about going to Vegas to double it. So no, but I had mentioned, and they knew that I had wanted to start a brewery initially. So, kind of got a business plan together from there, ended up taking over the space. But yeah, we are their suite 100. We are suite 107. So we're right at the other end of the same building. And interestingly enough, we also don't have a brew house. So we're kind of going the rare barrel model, which if listeners aren't familiar, which I'm sure a lot of them are, they don't have a brew house. They contract out work production. So
you might have the shortest drive, though, of anybody who's doing contracting out work. Yeah.
Currently, I do, but we're actually making a change in going to another brewery shortly. But yeah, I mean, I still I'm brewing a Pilsner this weekend on their system, on Rip Current system. And then I put it into a little tote and take it over. I've got 2 little stainless steel, jacketed fermenters, little 7 barrels, and fill those guys up. And, or I fill my barrels and sour fermenters up in my space.
Right. So we've been talking a lot about just the wild and the sours that you're doing, but you also have a clean beer program as well.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm imagining that's, I mean, one, you have to like the beers that you're making, but 2, it helps you make money a little bit faster.
Oh yeah. Now, so we weren't going to do that. We were not planning on doing that until probably, when did I get those fermenters in? So we opened, our first opening day was basically June 1st of last year. I think it was actually May 31st. And again, we've only been open 1 weekend a month up until recently. And of course, there was the shutdown with COVID and all that. California has been a peach regarding shutdowns. So that's been fun.
That's sarcasm for those who weren't picking up on it, but yeah.
Sorry, I've got a very dry sense of humor.
Yeah, so no, that's fine.
So we weren't planning on doing clean beer at all. And I actually, I mean, a part of it was money, but a big part of it was, oh my God, am I going to be able to brew clean beers again? Like, am I only going to have sour to drink at home now? Like, it's so weird. And I love brewing beer. I love, it's not like I only want to make sour beer. I want, specifically, I want to make, I wish I could brew Pilsners every day of the week. I love Pilsners. I love lagers. I would make lagers every day.
All right. This is not the appropriate show to be talking about lagers on.
Oh, really?
No.
Nobody likes lagers?
No, that's all we talk about on the show.
Oh, so sarcasm. I get it now.
I was just one for one. That's all.
That's great.
But yeah, you would if you could. Yeah.
Yeah. So we, I approached my investor and I was like, hey, can we get another 10 grand? Or actually it was 15 grand because I found these 2 used 7-barrel fermenters. I think we can logistically make this work, which is also naive because our space is so small and so difficult to work in. But it's fine. We make it work. But yeah, we picked up these 2 7-barrel fermenters probably in May, hooked them all up in about a week. And no, I'm sorry. This was early April, pardon me. Hooked them up in about a week, got our first couple of batches in there, and were able to have beer flowing by June 1st. And it's been big for our business. It was a really good decision because no matter how great the sour beer and great the producer is, it's so hard to just do sour. Specifically nowadays. You might have been able to get away with it a little bit ago, but
why nowadays? What's changed?
The mark. So there's like brand equity. It was easier like, for instance, and obviously the Rare Barrel has done just a killer job with branding and marketing initially, and they kind of got that section of the market. They also have food and are able to have guest taps to kind of supplement for the non-sour drinkers. But to be able to open and be a specifically sour brewery, number one, I feel like even then it would have been very difficult, but I feel like that kind of has come and gone, where the opportunity to market and brand that properly and has come and gone.
Right.
Just most of that equity, most of that market share is not there anymore. And not that sour beer is going down. I don't think it's going down, and actually I think we're about to go back up. But sour beer in general, kind of, if you're looking at a chart, it went up and kind of spiked at maybe the 2014 to 2015-ish range. I remember going to Craft Brewers Conference, and every talk was about mixed fermentation, barrel fermentation, all this stuff. And then we're kind of going back in a little bit of a lull on the sour beer side. I don't think it's dead by any means. Clearly it's been around for, hundreds or really thousands of years, because all beer was sour previously. But it's just tough. So, like
but
I said,
is that because so many people were sort of rushing into it?
Yeah,
I've gone through, on the blind panels for Wine Enthusiast, where I'm doing reviews, and just over the years as well, I've had a lot of quote unquote, sour or wild or things like that. And there's some where it's, it is a side project. And so people aren't necessarily like putting the, the time and energy into it. And the differences between the dedicated sour houses and the not is vast.
definitely.
So
yeah.
when you were formulating your recipes for Stave and Nail, and you start to think about, okay, what sort of DNA do you want these beers to be?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you start? And you have a house culture, I imagine.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a few going. This isn't what it really is an evolution. So we're constantly just evolving with cultures specifically. But I kind of, I had nailed down for the most part my base recipe, or maybe recipes, because I've kind of got like a Saison base. I've got a Berliner / Goza base, and then I've got a kind of your longer term sour base. And then I guess also I have a spontaneous base, but I haven't been able to brew that this year, obviously, yet. I got one batch in last year. It just doesn't really get cold enough to be doing the cool ship. But the base beer is not as important as the yeast and bacteria. It is still very important, but we wanted to be very light in color. That's kind of just the sours I prefer. I don't do a lot of red or dark bases, although I do dabble. And my idea regarding it's not like I'm necessarily going for a house character, because I was never really a fan of that. I liked to see out of the sour breweries, I like to see, I think that a really good and diverse list of sour beer, meaning different yeast characters across the board, but well executed. That's what I personally liked from a sour brewery. I didn't like, and not saying like Cascade is always what people mention with regards to like, oh yeah, Cascade tastes the same all the way across the board. Every beer is just a different fruit character. I didn't want to be that, and trust me, I love Cascade. I love the beers they produce, but they are kind of singular, lactic forward. Not a huge amount of character. I didn't want to fall into that kind of trap of, or you really do trap yourself in by always trying to have a specific character.
Right.
So the way I tackled this was diversity across my cellar. So every beer is has kind of a different target, I guess. So I'll brew, I don't know, 10 to 20. I'd have to look at my logs, but 17 barrel batches across the year, split those among barrels. And even with one batch, I'm I'm fermenting with different intention. So different strains of Brettanomyces across the different barrels. And these are mostly all things that I've used, although I will slip in new things. But the goal is I want some acid in my cellar. So maybe brewing with lower IBUs, heavier amounts of proteins and stuff for the bugs to chew on over time. Maybe there's some barrels that are PDO focused, so Pediococcus focused, as opposed to Lactobacillus. And then, maybe lighter on the Brettanomyces character, although that pretty much that's a little harder to control as Brett character. And then some of the barrels will be intentionally not sour and more Brett, more funky, more barnyard, more, fruity. I really like the fruity Brett strains. But to answer your question, no real character. We weren't really going for, we didn't want to have Stave and Nail like, oh, that's a Stave and Nail beer. What I wanted was I want to be able to blend any type of beer across the spectrum with what I have in my barrel cellar at any given time.
Yeah. Has that helped you stand out in San Diego of having this sort of thoughtfulness behind it? You were mentioning before, brown ales and IPAs, and, obviously that's what the area is known for. But, when you have this sort of thoughtfulness to it, are you finding that people are connecting with you on the level that you want them to?
Mostly. Yeah. And I'm hoping, your goal is to always be just getting better in general. And hopefully, like I said, I got this new marketing girl, so we're looking for it. But I believe that, thoughtfulness is a great word for this. And I believe that has been our biggest, people see through the weak marketing that really you can't see like the owners standing behind it. Mm-hmm. Or like a lot of breweries don't even know who the owners are, or who really is the soul behind the brewery. That I think has been, the beers aside, I think our biggest pull in San Diego, and the reason that our brand is still, obviously we're still just barely developing this thing, but I think we're getting traction with the brand because people see the care behind the beer. I don't make a beer that, it sucks, but I've already dumped, it's hard to even say this, but I've already dumped 2 of my clean 7-barrel batches because they just weren't, they weren't it, and at Rip Current, I didn't dump a beer. We dumped maybe 1 beer over my 8 years, maybe 2. But already, because, it's early, I don't want to mess that up. I don't want to like you said, you only get one chance at a first impression.
Yeah.
I don't want to mess this initial year up by putting out something that I don't believe in. And that goes all the way through the marketing now to, the food aspect, which we're just starting to kind of bring into play, all the way to the brewery that we built. We built everything by hand. I wanted to show that. I want to go, and I do this all the time, because people are coming up to me like, oh my God, I love the barrel stave wall. I love the chandeliers. And I love telling people, my dad, my brother, myself, my girlfriend, we built all this stuff. We wanted to put that care into it, across the board. We want the atmosphere to match the beer, to match our passion.
When you think about how crowded San Diego is, and I know there's obviously still room to grow, and businesses sort of come and go, you've been thinking about having your own place for quite a while, and you've worked at other places, and now you have your own place. What does growth look like? What does it seems to me like you're a guy who's always thinking about sort of next steps, and so like where's your mind taking you right now?
Right. Well, I'll say this. So I'm definitely always thinking of the next step. That's kind of, I see that as my job, my main job. Well, it's been so many different roles, but that's why now the delegation of these things allows me do my job as the owner, and kind of, just driving the bus, just keeping us going and keeping us looking towards the future. So I'm happy, and I feel like I owe that to the people that are working for me to constantly be, I don't want to just be, I know there's too many breweries, specifically in San Diego, that you could tell year one, this is number one, this brewery is probably going to close eventually. And number two, it's just too generic to really get any traction in the marketplace. So our evolution, my initial thought was, I think this could be an excellent restaurant concept. I come from a restaurant background. I love culinary. I love to cook. I've always loved it. I love the service aspect of restaurants. So that being said, from the beginning, Stave and Nail I've always had an aspiration with it to combine sour beer, just beer in general, with a restaurant concept. And now that's sort of where we're starting to develop. And I think this is where we would set ourselves apart. I don't want to get too far into the details.
Sure.
But kind of the general idea is we are going with a specific type of spirit focused bar.
Okay.
So we're going to go with a Type 75 license, this is tentative. We're still, we're probably 1 to 2 years out, but the investors are starting to line up, and things are starting to fall into place, especially with the way things are going now. Rents are starting to get a lot cheaper. So we're starting to think, okay, let's not, I don't want to just not fail right now. I want to progress through this, kind of bullshit, pardon my French, this craziness, all of this, all this madness and kind of sadness. Everybody's just sad. And I don't want to come out of this just like, oh, well, we made it, or, oh, we closed. Definitely don't want that. I want to come out of this with, the guns blazing, would be my hope. And so, yeah, we're going to do we're Southern California, so might be able to pick guess the spirit and the type of food, because we're pretty closely tied to somewhere.
Tequilas and tacos. All right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We're trying to do a bar focused on that, mixed with our beer. So the grand vision would be kind of a little more upscale, large selection of only 2 different types of spirits. So upscale food, those types of spirits, and mixed with fooders, mixed with barrels, mixed with a big shiny new brew house for me.
Nice.
And that's kind of the vision going forward. And I think there's certainly a lot of room in San Diego, and nobody's doing this. And we're just so, kind of just trying to strike at the opportune moment, I guess.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot to look forward to, and another reason to come back out and visit San Diego once we can all get on planes again and go places without worry. So,
hey, look me up. I'll take care of you. I promise.
No, we'll do. Justin, thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you for reaching out, and thanks to Brandon Hernandez for setting this thing up. Really cool.
Thanks always to Brandon Hernandez. That's Justin Stambaugh of Stave and Nail. My thanks to him for coming on the show, and thanks again to Brandon Hernandez for the introduction. Remember to check out his SanDiegoBeer.news site. And also listen to Steal This Beer. Brandon was a guest 2 weeks ago, and we had a fun conversation over the black glasses. And of course, for more podcasts, check out Andy Crouch on the Beer Edge podcast and the BYO Nano podcast. I have some fun shows planned in the coming weeks and some conversations in the can, but let me know who you might want to hear. Reach out at John Hall, it's JOHNHOLL, at beeredge.com, or you can join the conversation on Twitter at John_Hall, and make sure to follow Beer Edge on all of the social media channels at The Beer Edge. And if you're so inclined, Go on to iTunes or wherever else you're listening to podcasts these days and leave a review. It really does help other people find the show. Nate Schweber does the music. Jeff Quinn designed the logo. I'm John Hall, and new episodes of this show release every Wednesday. And that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.